The forest of Verdant 7 was quiet except for the sound of Deho's plasma axe cutting through wood. The tall trees fell one by one, crashing to the ground with deep thuds that shook the earth. Deho was a giant of a man, standing nearly 7 feet tall with muscles built from years of hard labor. His face was covered in a thick beard, and his hands were rough and scarred. He worked alone, far from the human colony, because that was how he liked it. The other loggers called him the Mountain behind his back. They said he was too quiet, too serious, too dangerous to be around. Deho did not care what they said. He came to work before sunrise and left after dark. He spoke to no one. He ate his meals alone in his small cabin at the edge of the logging zone. This was his life, and he had chosen it this way. Today was like any other day. The twin suns of Verdant 7 were high in the sky, making the air warm and thick. Deho wiped sweat from his forehead and reached for his water bottle. That was when he heard the sound. It was small and high-pitched, like the crying of a hurt animal. He stopped moving and listened carefully. The sound came again. This time it was closer. Deho turned around slowly, his hand moving to the plasma axe on his belt. The forest was dangerous. There were creatures here that could kill a man in seconds. But when he saw what made the sound, he froze. 2 small creatures stood at the edge of the clearing. They were nothing like the animals of this world. They had thin bodies covered in smooth, pale shells that looked almost like armor. Their heads were round with large black eyes that took up most of their faces. 4 arms hung from their small bodies, and they walked on 2 thin legs. Each one was barely 2 feet tall. Deho recognized them immediately. They were Velhari, one of the alien species that lived in the outer colonies. He had seen pictures of them before, but never in person. Humans and Velhari did not get along well. There had been fights over land and resources for many years. Most humans avoided the Velhari, and the Velhari avoided humans. But these 2 were children. Deho could tell by their size and the way they moved. They were scared, their small bodies shaking as they stared up at him. One of them had a crack in the shell on its arm, and green liquid dripped from the wound. The other had dirt and scratches all over its body. The injured one made a clicking sound and pointed with one of its small arms toward the deeper forest. The other one did the same, clicking frantically. They both wore small metal devices on their chests, but the devices were broken, hanging by wires and sparking occasionally. Deho realized these must be translator machines. Without them, he could not understand their language, and they could not understand his. For a long moment, Deho just stood there. His mind told him to walk away. This was not his problem. The Velhari had their own colonies and their own people to help them. Getting involved could cause trouble. The last thing he needed was more trouble in his life. But then the injured child stumbled forward and fell to the ground. The other one rushed to help, making desperate clicking sounds. The fallen child looked up at Deho with those huge black eyes, and something inside his chest twisted painfully. Deho slowly lowered his plasma axe to the ground. He dropped to one knee, making himself smaller and less frightening. The children backed away at first, but he held up his hands to show he meant no harm. Slowly, carefully, he reached for the water bottle on his belt. He opened it and held it out toward the injured child. The 2 children looked at each other, clicking quietly. Then the injured one reached out with a shaking hand and took the bottle. It drank quickly, water spilling down its shell. The other child drank next, and some of the fear left their eyes. Deho pulled off his work shirt, leaving only his undershirt. He tore the shirt into strips and gestured toward the injured child's arm. The child seemed to understand. It held out its arm, and Deho carefully wrapped the cloth around the cracked shell. The child made a soft clicking sound that might have been thank you. Now came the hard part. Deho needed to understand what they wanted. He looked around and found a patch of bare dirt. Using his finger, he drew a simple picture of the 2 children. Then he drew an arrow pointing into the forest. He looked at them and raised his eyebrows in question. The children became excited, clicking rapidly. The uninjured one grabbed a stick and began drawing in the dirt too. It drew more small figures like themselves, gathered together. Then it drew large square shapes with wheels, and it made the squares crush some of the small figures. Finally, it drew a big X over everything. Daeho's jaw tightened as he understood. There was a Vilhari settlement somewhere in the forest. Something with wheels, probably machines, was attacking it and destroying their homes. These children had been sent to find help. The injured child began pointing at Daeho with all four of its small arms. Then it pointed deeper into the forest. The message was clear. They wanted him to come with them. They wanted him to help. Daeho sat back on his heels and closed his eyes. His mind filled with memories he tried hard to forget. He remembered another time, another colony, another disaster. He remembered the face of his wife, Misun, and his little daughter, Yuna. He remembered how he had not been there to save them when the colony's life support failed. He remembered arriving too late, finding only silence and empty rooms. He had sworn after that day to never care again, to never get involved, to never feel that kind of pain again. That was why he worked alone. That was why he spoke to no one. That was why he lived like a ghost in the forest. But when he opened his eyes, he saw the two small alien children staring at him with hope in their strange black eyes. The injured. One reached out and touched his massive hand with one tiny finger. In that moment, looking at these scared, hurt children, Daeho saw his own daughter's face. He saw every child who needed help and had no one to protect them. His decision was made before he even realized it. Daeho stood up to his full height. He picked up his plasma axe and attached it to his belt. Then he walked to his logging mech, a huge machine called Big Timber that stood 30 feet tall with massive metal arms and legs. He climbed up the ladder and opened the cabin door. Looking down at the two children, he gestured for them to come up. They hesitated only a moment before climbing the ladder with surprising speed. Daeho lifted them carefully into the cabin and set them on the passenger seat. He strapped them in with the safety harness. Then he sat in the pilot's seat and fired up the mech's engine. The machine roared to life and all the systems lit up green. Daeho gripped the controls and spoke his first words in 3 months. "Let's go get your family." The mech turned toward the deep forest and began to walk. Behind them, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky orange and red. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness between the trees, people needed help. And for the first time in years, Daeho was going toward danger instead of away from it. The two children made soft clicking sounds beside him. He did not know their names. He did not speak their language. But none of that mattered now. All that mattered was getting them home and making sure whatever was attacking their people stopped for good. The mountain was moving, and nothing was going to stand in his way. The logging mech moved through the forest like a metal giant. Its heavy feet crushed bushes and small trees as it walked. Inside the cabin, Daeho kept his eyes on the forest ahead while the two alien children sat strapped in beside him. They made clicking sounds to each other, sometimes pointing through the window at different directions. Daeho tried to follow where they pointed, but it was not easy. The forest grew thicker the deeper they went. The trees here were ancient and massive, some as wide as houses. Their branches blocked most of the sunlight, making everything dim and shadowy. This was the wild part of Verdant 7, the part where few humans dared to go. After an hour of walking, the uninjured child began clicking loudly and pulling on Daeho's arm. It pointed to the left toward a small clearing. Daeho steered the mech in that direction and stopped. Through the window, he could see the remains of a camp. There were small cloth shelters torn to pieces and scattered belongings everywhere. Daeho shut down the mech and climbed out. The children followed him down the ladder. The moment their feet touched the ground, they ran to the destroyed camp. The injured child picked up a small carved piece of wood and held it close, making sad clicking sounds. The other child found a torn piece of colorful fabric and pressed it against its face. Daeho walked around the camp slowly. He found deep tracks in the dirt, the kind made by heavy machines. The tracks were fresh, maybe only a day old. Whatever made them had crushed everything in its path. He also found scorch marks on some of the trees, like something had fired energy weapons. He knelt down in the dirt again and gestured for the children to come closer. They approached slowly, still holding their found belongings. Daeho began to draw in the dirt. He drew the two children and the destroyed camp. Then he drew a question mark. He pointed at the tracks and raised his eyebrows. The children understood immediately. They both began drawing frantically. The uninjured child drew box shapes with wheels and mechanical arms. The injured one drew symbols that looked like tools or weapons. Together they drew many of these machines, all heading in one direction. Then the uninjured child drew something new. It drew a symbol that Daeho recognized from colony reports. It was the logo of Taeyang Industries, a big company that mined minerals and resources across many worlds. Daeho's face grew dark. He knew about Taeyang Industries. They were rich and powerful, and they did not care who they hurt to make more money. The injured child was drawing something else now. It drew a large group of small figures clustered together inside what looked like a circle of trees. Then it drew the machines approaching the circle. Finally, it drew two small figures running away from the group. The message was painfully clear. There was a Velhari settlement somewhere ahead. Mining machines from Taeyang Industries were attacking it, destroying homes and probably killing people. The children's parents had sent them to find help before the machines reached their home. The children had run for hours, maybe days, until they found Daeho. Daeho stood up and looked toward where the tracks led. His hands clenched into fists. He had seen what mining companies did when they wanted land. They did not negotiate. They did not ask permission. They just took what they wanted and destroyed everything else. The injured child tugged on his pant leg. When he looked down, it was drawing again. This time it drew two larger figures standing with the children. One had curving lines around its head and the other had straight lines. Daeho guessed these were meant to show different appearances, maybe hair or head decorations. The child pointed at these two figures and then at itself and its companion. Then it made a long, sad clicking sound. These were their parents, Jiwoo and Bora, though Daeho did not know their names yet. The children were not just asking him to save a settlement. They were asking him to save their family. Daeho closed his eyes and let out a long breath. Memories flooded back into his mind, memories he tried every day to forget. He remembered the colony where he had lived with his wife and daughter. It was called New Sol Station, a small mining colony on an ice planet. He remembered getting the emergency call while he was working in the deep mines. Life support failure, toxic gas leak. Evacuate immediately. He remembered running through the corridors, pushing through crowds of panicking people. He remembered reaching his family's quarters and finding the door sealed. Through the window he could see Mi-sun holding little Yuna in her arms. His wife was already unconscious and his daughter was barely breathing. The lock was jammed. The override would not work. He had pulled and smashed at the door until his hands bled, but it would not open. By the time emergency crews cut through the door, it was too late. Mi-sun and Yuna were gone, along with 43 other people who could not escape in time. The official report said it was a tragic accident, a faulty valve that no one could have predicted, but Daeho learned the truth later. The colony's owner, a big corporation like Taeyang Industries, had skipped safety inspections to save money. They knew the valve was bad. They just did not care enough to fix it. After the funerals, Daeho left that life behind. He quit his mining job and moved to the frontier. He became a lumberjack because he wanted to work alone, far from people and corporations and all the pain they caused. For 3 years he had lived in silence and solitude, trying to forget what he had lost. But now, looking at these two scared alien children, he could not forget. He could only remember. And the memory hurt like a fresh wound. The children were watching him with their large black eyes. They could not understand his thoughts, but maybe they understood his pain. The injured one reached out and touched his hand again with one small finger. The gesture was gentle and trusting. Daeho made his decision. He could not save his own family. He had been too late, too far away, too helpless. But he was here now, and these children had found him before it was too late. He would not fail them the way he had failed Mi-sun and Yuna. He pointed at the mech and then at the direction the tracks led. He made a walking motion with his fingers and looked at the children with raised eyebrows. They both nodded eagerly, clicking with excitement. They understood that he was asking if that was the way to their home. Daeho picked up both children easily, one in each arm. They weighed almost nothing to a man his size. He carried them back to the mech and placed them in the cabin. This time he gave them his emergency rations to eat, some dried fruit and protein bars. They ate hungrily, making happy clicking sounds. While they ate, Daeho checked his mech systems. Big Timber was built for cutting and moving trees, not for fighting. It had heavy lifting arms, a plasma axe for cutting and magnetic grapples for grabbing logs. The armor was thick enough to protect against falling branches, but he did not know if it could stop weapon fire. The power cell was at 70%, enough for maybe 6 hours of heavy work. It would have to be enough. Dae-ho climbed into the pilot seat and started the engine. The children had finished eating and were watching him with those trusting eyes. He suddenly wished he could speak their language, to tell them everything would be okay, but he could not make that promise, so he said nothing. Instead, he pushed the mech's controls forward, and they began moving again. The tracks were easy to follow now. The machines had left a clear path of destruction through the forest. Broken trees, torn earth, and scorch marks showed exactly where they had gone. As they traveled, Dae-ho began to hear new sounds in the distance. Mechanical grinding, metal smashing against wood, the high-pitched whine of energy weapons charging, and underneath it all the clicking and chirping sounds of many Velari voices crying out in fear and pain. The settlement was close now. The children heard it too. They began clicking frantically, pointing ahead with all 4 of their arms. Tears ran down their strange faces. One of them was calling out, making sounds that might have been names. Mom. Dad. Home. Dae-ho pushed the mech to move faster. The machine was not built for speed, but he forced every bit of power he could into the leg servos. Trees whipped past them. The sounds of destruction grew louder and louder. Then they broke through the tree line, and Dae-ho saw the Velari settlement for the first time. His breath caught in his throat. It was beautiful. The Velari had built their homes inside and around the massive trees, carving out spaces in the living wood. Glowing lights shone from the structures, bioluminescent plants that lit everything with soft blue and green colors. Bridges made of woven vines connected different trees, and gardens grew on multiple levels. But that beauty was being destroyed. 20 mining drones moved through the settlement like metal locusts. They were each the size of a car, with cutting arms and drilling equipment. They smashed into homes and tore them apart. They cut through bridges and knocked down gardens. Velari people ran in every direction, trying to save their belongings and their children. Dae-ho saw one Velari adult standing on a high platform, clicking commands at the others. This must be a leader trying to organize an evacuation, but there was nowhere to run. The drones were everywhere. The children in the cabin were crying now, pressing their faces against the window. Dae-ho looked at them, then at the burning settlement, then at his own scarred hands on the mech's controls. He had come to this forest to be alone, to hide from the world and its pain, but the world had found him anyway, and now it was as the logging mech burst into the clearing like thunder. Dae-ho did not slow down or hesitate. He aimed straight for the nearest mining drone and slammed into it with the mech's full weight. The impact threw the drone backward into a tree, crushing its chassis. Sparks flew from its broken body and it stopped moving. The other drones immediately turned toward this new threat. Their sensors locked onto the logging mech and they began to advance. Dae-ho could see their weapons charging, red lights glowing on their arms. These were not simple mining tools. They were equipped with cutting lasers and armor-piercing drills designed to tear through solid rock. Dae-ho grabbed the mech's control sticks and activated the plasma axe. The weapon hummed to life, its blade glowing with superheated energy. He swung the mech's right arm in a wide arc, and the plasma axe cut through 2 drones like they were made of paper. They fell in pieces, their systems dying with electronic screams. 3 more drones rushed at him from different sides. Dae-ho spun the mech and used its heavy left arm to punch one drone, crushing its sensor array. The drone stumbled blindly and crashed into another one. Before they could recover, Dae-ho brought the plasma axe down on both of them, splitting them apart. Around the settlement, the Velari people had stopped running. They stared in shock at the human in the giant machine who was destroying their attackers. Some of them began clicking and chirping in what might have been cheers. Others just stood frozen, unable to believe what they were seeing. A Velari adult ran onto the high platform where the leader stood. This adult was larger than the others, with darker shell coloring and decorative markings. It clicked urgently at the leader, pointing at the mech. The leader clicked back and gestured for calm. Its posture suggested it was trying to understand if Dae-ho was friend or enemy. Dae-ho did not have time to worry about that. 5 more drones were approaching, these ones larger and heavier than the first group. They spread out trying to surround the mech. Their drills spun up to full speed, making a horrible grinding sound. One drone lunged forward and drove its drill into the mech's left leg. The drill bit through the outer armor and into the hydraulic system underneath. Red warning lights flashed on Daeho's control panel. The left leg began to respond slowly, damaged but still functional. Daeho gritted his teeth. He could not let them surround him. He activated the magnetic grapples, tools normally used for grabbing and lifting logs. The grapples shot out on heavy cables and latched onto the drone that had damaged his leg. With a pull of the controls, Daeho yanked the drone off the ground and swung it like a club, smashing it into two other drones. All three went down in a tangled pile of metal. But while he dealt with those three, another drone had climbed onto the mech's back. It began drilling into the rear armor, trying to reach the power cell. If it succeeded, the whole mech would explode. Daeho could not reach it with the arms, and he could not shake it off. Suddenly, the children in the cabin began clicking frantically. The uninjured one was pointing at something through the window. Daeho looked and saw what it meant. There was a massive tree directly ahead, one of the ancient giants that held Velhari homes. The child was suggesting something crazy and dangerous. Daeho understood immediately. He gunned the mech's engines and rushed toward the tree. At the last second, he spun the mech around so its back was facing the trunk. Then he slammed backward into the tree with all the force he could manage. The impact was tremendous. The whole mech shook and Daeho was thrown against his safety harness, but the plan worked. The drone on the mech's back was crushed between the metal armor and the solid tree. It fell to the ground in pieces, sparking and dying. Daeho checked his systems. The mech had taken damage from the impact and the power cell was now at 40%. He had destroyed 11 drones, but 9 more remained. And these last 9 seemed to be learning from his tactics. They hung back, circling at a distance, analyzing his movements. Then they attacked all at once. 3 came from the front, 3 from the sides, and 3 tried to climb the mech from below. It was a coordinated assault, something their computer brains had calculated would work. And it might have worked against a normal pilot who fought by logic and programming. But Daeho was not a normal pilot. He was a human who had worked in the forests for years, dealing with falling trees, sudden storms, and equipment failures. He knew how to think fast and act faster. More than that, he was fighting for something he believed in. That made all the difference. He swung the plasma axe in a spinning pattern, keeping the front 3 drones at bay. At the same time, he stamped the mech's feet in rapid succession, crushing the 3 trying to climb from below. For the 3 on the sides, he used a trick he had learned from moving logs on steep hills. He overbalanced the mech deliberately, letting it fall to the right side. The drones on that side tried to scatter, but they were too slow. The mech's massive weight crashed down on them, turning them into flattened scrap. Then Daeho used the mech's arms to push off the ground and right the machine again. It was a move that should have been impossible for something so heavy. But human engineering and desperation made it work. 6 drones left. They regrouped and prepared for another attack. But before they could move, something new entered the battlefield. A shadow fell over everything, blocking out the sun. Daeho looked up and felt his stomach drop. A harvester-class mining machine was emerging from the forest. It was enormous, at least 10 stories tall, with multiple drilling arms and heavy armor plating. This was not a simple drone. This was a full industrial mining platform, designed to tear apart mountains and extract ore from deep inside planets. Its weapons could punch through starship hulls. The Velhari saw it too. Their clicking turned from hopeful to terrified. Many of them began running again, grabbing their children and heading for the far side of the settlement. The leader on the platform clicked out what must have been an evacuation order. The 2 children in Daeho's cabin were crying and clicking frantically. They knew what that machine could do. It would destroy the entire settlement in minutes, killing everyone who could not run fast enough. All of Daeho's fighting would mean nothing if that harvester reached the center of the village. Daeho looked at his control panel. Power at 35%, left leg damaged. Rear armor compromised, plasma axe functioning but overheating. The mech was barely holding together. There was no way he could fight that harvester and win. He could run. The children's parents were probably somewhere in the fleeing crowd. He could grab as many Velhari as possible and get them out of here. It was the smart thing to do, the logical choice. Live to fight another day. But Daeho looked at the settlement behind him. He saw homes built with care and love, gardens grown over years, bridges connecting families. He saw Velhari adults shielding their children with their own bodies as they ran. He saw the leader still standing on the platform, refusing to leave until everyone else was safe. This was their home. These were their lives. And some big corporation thought it could just take it all away because there was money to be made. Daeho thought about New Seoul Station. He thought about how the corporation that owned it had valued profit over safety, money over lives. He thought about Mi-soon and Yuna dying because some executive decided that inspections cost too much. He thought about all the times he had felt powerless to stop the cruelty of the powerful against the weak. He was not powerless now. He had a giant mech, a plasma axe, and a choice to make. Daeho reached over and unstrapped the two children from their harness. They clicked in confusion as he opened the cabin door. Gently, he lifted them and placed them on the mech's shoulder just outside the cabin. Then he pointed firmly toward the ground and made a shooing motion. The children understood. They were supposed to climb down and run to safety. But they did not move. Instead, they clicked at him urgently, pulling on his arm, trying to get him to come with them. They knew what he was planning. They knew he was going to do something that might get him killed. Daeho smiled at them. It was the first smile that had crossed his face in 3 years. Then he gently pushed them toward the ladder. This time they went, climbing down quickly. When they reached the ground, they stopped and looked back up at him. Daeho gave them a small wave. Then he closed the cabin door and turned the mech to face the harvester. The giant machine was still advancing, its drills spinning, its sensors locked on the settlement. The 6 remaining drones moved to join it, forming an escort. Daeho looked at his power gauge one last time. 35%. Not enough to win a fight, but maybe enough for something else. His hands moved over the controls, accessing the power cell's safety systems. He found what he was looking for. The emergency overload function, designed to give one massive burst of power in extreme situations. Using it would destroy the power cell and probably the entire mech. It was a last resort, meant only for life or death emergencies. This seemed like the right time. Daeho entered the override code and activated the overload sequence. A countdown appeared on his screen. 60 seconds until detonation. The power gauge jumped to 150%, far beyond safe levels darkness. Pain. The smell of smoke and burning metal. These were the first things Daeho became aware of as consciousness slowly returned to him. His whole body felt like it was on fire. Every breath sent sharp agony through his chest. He tried to move but found he could not. Something heavy was pressing down on him from all sides. His eyes would not open at first. They felt crushed and swollen. He worked at it, forcing them apart with sheer will, and finally managed to see through narrow slits. Everything was blurry and dark. He was trapped inside what remained of the mech's cabin, surrounded by twisted metal and broken machinery. Smoke drifted through cracks in the wreckage, making it hard to breathe. Daeho tried to remember what had happened. The explosion. Yes. He had overloaded the power cell and destroyed the harvester. The memory was hazy and distant, like something from a dream. Had it worked? Was the settlement safe? Were the children okay? He tried to move again and immediately regretted it. The pain in his left arm was unbearable. He looked down and saw why. A piece of metal was driven through his forearm, pinning it to what was left of the pilot's seat. His right leg was bent at an angle that was definitely wrong. Blood covered his clothes, though he could not tell how much of it was his own. For a moment, Daeho considered just closing his eyes and letting go. It would be easy. The pain would stop. He could finally join Mi-soon and Yuna wherever they had gone. He had fought his fight and done what he could. No one would blame him for giving up now. But then he heard something. A clicking sound, muffled and distant. Then another. Then many clicking sounds all at once, growing closer. Voices, Velhari voices. They were calling out, searching for something. Searching for him. Daeho took a shaky breath and forced his mouth to work. Here, he tried to say, but it came out as barely a whisper. He tried again, louder. I'm here. The clicking sounds grew excited and urgent. He heard movement around the wreckage, the sound of metal being pulled and shifted. Light began to filter in through new gaps in the debris. Shadows moved on the other side of the twisted steel. Stand back, Daeho rasped. Sharp metal. Dangerous. But of course they could not understand him. He heard warning clicks and chirps, probably the same message he was trying to give. They were being careful, working slowly to avoid causing the wreckage to shift and crush him further. It took a long time. Daeho faded in and out of consciousness as they worked. Sometimes he woke to find more light, more space around him. Other times he woke to complete darkness and thought he had died until he heard the clicking sounds again and knew he was still alive. Finally, after what felt like hours, enough debris was cleared away that he could see outside. Dozens of Velhari surrounded the wreckage, working together to free him. Some were pulling away smaller pieces of metal. Others were using primitive tools to pry apart larger sections. All of them moved with desperate purpose. The leader he had seen before was directing the operation, clicking out orders. When it saw Deho's eyes open, it rushed forward and made gentle clicking sounds. The meaning was clear even without words. "Hold on, we are coming. You are not alone." More metal was pulled away. Finally, they could reach Deho directly. Several Velari climbed into the wreckage, moving carefully around the sharp edges. They saw the piece of metal through his arm and paused, clicking with concern. Deho understood their hesitation. If they pulled it out, he might bleed to death. But if they left it in, they could not move him. And he would die anyway from his other injuries. He looked at the closest Velhari and nodded slowly. "Do it. Get it over with." The Velhari seemed to understand. It called to others outside, and they passed in strips of cloth and what looked like medical supplies. They wrapped the cloth around his arm above and below the metal. Then, while several of them held him steady, one pulled the metal out in one quick motion. Deho screamed. He could not help it. The pain was beyond anything he had ever felt. His vision went white and he thought he would pass out. But hands held him up. Dozens of small alien hands supporting his weight and keeping him conscious through touch alone. They wrapped his arm tightly with more cloth, stopping the bleeding as much as they could. Then they carefully lifted him out of the wreckage. It took 10 Velari working together to move his large body, but they managed it. They laid him on the ground outside on a soft bed of leaves and cloth they had prepared. Deho looked up at the sky. The twin suns were setting, painting everything orange and purple. Around him, the Velhari settlement still stood. Damaged, yes, but standing. Homes could be rebuilt. Gardens could be replanted. The people were alive. That was what mattered. A female Velhari pushed through the crowd. She carried a satchel of supplies and moved with the confidence of someone who knew medicine. This must be their healer. She knelt beside Deho and began examining his injuries, clicking softly to herself as she worked. The healer opened her satchel and pulled out various items. Some Deho recognized as bandages and antiseptic. Others were completely alien, including a glowing blue paste and what looked like living moss. She began treating his wounds, working quickly but carefully. When she applied the blue paste to his burns, Deho felt the pain lessen slightly. The paste was cool and seemed to numb his skin. Other Velhari brought water and tried to help him drink, though it was difficult with his injuries. They were gentle and patient, supporting his head and letting him take small sips. Some of the water spilled down his chin, but no one seemed to mind. As the healer worked, Deho saw more of the settlement around him. The damage was significant. Several homes had been destroyed completely, and many others were badly damaged. But the ancient trees themselves still stood, and the Velhari were already beginning to clean up and rebuild. They were survivors, these small people. They would recover. The two children pushed through the crowd, clicking frantically. 2 larger Velhari followed them, their shells marked with the same patterns as the children. These must be their parents, Jiwoo and Bora. The family rushed to Deho's side, all clicking at once. The children reached him first. They pressed their small hands against his uninjured shoulder, making soft clicking sounds that might have been crying. They kept touching his face gently as if making sure he was real and alive. Deho managed a weak smile for them. The parents stood back slightly, their posture showing something like reverence or awe. Jiwoo made a long series of clicks, his tone formal and serious. Bora clicked in response, touching one hand to her chest and then gesturing to Deho. The meaning was unclear, but the emotion behind it was not. They were grateful. More than grateful. They were in debt. The healer clicked sharply at everyone, shooing them back. She had more work to do and the crowd was not helping. The family reluctantly moved aside, but the children kept watching Deho with their huge eyes, not wanting to let him out of their sight. Over the next hour, the healer did what she could. She set Deho's broken leg as straight as possible and wrapped it in splints. She covered his burns with more of the blue paste and wrapped his wounded arm in layers of the living moss, which seemed to help with the pain. She gave him some kind of herbal drink that tasted terrible, but made his mind clearer. When she was finished, she sat back and clicked at the leader, who had been watching the whole time. They had a conversation in their language, and the leader's posture gradually became more hopeful. The healer could not fix everything, but Deho would live if he was lucky and fought to recover. Other Velhari had brought materials and were building a shelter around Deho. They worked with incredible speed, weaving branches and cloth into a sturdy structure. Within an hour, he was lying inside a small but comfortable space, protected from the wind and rain. They brought blankets and pillows, making him as comfortable as possible. The leader entered the shelter and knelt beside him. It looked at Deho for a long moment, then placed one hand over its chest and bowed its head deeply. The gesture was universal: respect, thanks, honor. Deho tried to speak but found his voice was nearly gone. The leader made a quieting gesture and clicked softly. Rest, heal, you are safe here. The healer returned regularly over the next 3 days, changing his bandages and applying fresh medicine. The living moss on his arm was doing something remarkable. When she removed it each day to check the wound, Deho could see that his skin was actually healing faster than it should. The deep gash was closing, new skin growing over it. The Velhari had medical knowledge that was different from human medicine, but clearly effective. The children visited constantly. They brought him food and water, sitting by his side and clicking softly. Sometimes they just held his hand with their small fingers. At night, they slept curled up near his shelter, refusing to leave. Their parents came too, bringing gifts of food and handmade items. Deho understood this was their way of showing gratitude. On the 4th day, Deho woke to find his mind clearer than it had been. The pain was still there, constant and burning, but manageable. He could think again. He could see properly. His body was starting to heal slowly but surely. The healer came for her morning visit. Her name was Sohee, though Deho did not know this yet. She had barely left his side for 4 days, sleeping in short shifts so she could. Deho had been recovering in the Velhari settlement for 2 weeks when the ships arrived. He was sitting outside his shelter, his leg still in splints but his other injuries healing well. The children, whose names he now knew were Hana and Taijun, were teaching him basic Velhari words through clicking and gestures. They made a game of it, laughing when he tried to imitate their sounds and failed badly. Then the sound of engines filled the air. Everyone in the settlement stopped what they were doing and looked up. 3 sleek aircraft descended from the sky, bearing the logo of Taeyang Industries. Behind them came 2 larger ships marked with the symbols of colonial security forces. The ships landed in the clearing where the destroyed harvester still lay in pieces. Kyung-soo, the settlement leader, clicked urgently to his people. His tone was worried, so he quickly helped Deho to his feet and handed him a walking stick. Ji-woo and Bora gathered their children close. The entire settlement gathered together, watching the ships with fear in their eyes. The ship doors opened, and people in expensive suits walked out, followed by armed security forces in body armor. The man leading them was tall and well-dressed, his hair perfectly styled despite the forest setting. He looked at the destroyed machines with visible anger, then turned his sharp gaze on the Velhari settlement. One of the security officers walked forward carrying a speaker device. He activated it and his voice boomed across the clearing. "Attention! This is Colonial Security. We are here to investigate the destruction of legal mining equipment belonging to Taeyang Industries. The responsible parties are to present themselves immediately." Kyung-soo stepped forward bravely, though his small body was shaking. He clicked into his translator device, which converted his words to human language. "We are here, but we only defended our home. Those machines were destroying our village." The well-dressed man stepped forward. His translator badge identified him as Insu, Senior Operations Manager for Taeyang Industries. He smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "Your village, you say? That is interesting, because according to colonial registry records, there is no authorized Velhari settlement in this sector. This land is unclaimed territory, which makes it available for commercial development." Kyung-soo clicked in protest. "We have lived here for 12 years. We built our homes here. We raised our children here. This is our land." Insu pulled out a tablet and showed it to the security forces. "As you can see, officer, there are no registration documents for this settlement. No legal claim filed. No permits issued. Under Colonial Law Section 47, Paragraph 12, this makes them squatters on unclaimed land. Our company filed proper development claims 6 months ago. Everything we did here was completely legal." The security officer looked uncomfortable but nodded. "That appears to be correct, sir? Correct?" Kyung-soo's clicking grew agitated, and his translator struggled to keep up. You destroyed our homes.
You attacked our people.
You tried to kill us.
Insu's expression did not change. We removed obstacles from legally claimed mining territory. If unauthorized persons were present, that is unfortunate, but not our responsibility. They should have filed proper documentation. He turned to the security officer. Now about the destroyed equipment. That harvester alone was worth 8 million credits. The drones add another 2 million. Someone will pay for this damage. The security officer cleared his throat. Who destroyed the equipment? For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daeho pushed through the crowd, leaning heavily on his walking stick. His body was still covered in bandages and he moved with obvious pain, but he stood as straight as he could. I did it. Insu turned to look at him, studying him like an insect under glass. And you are, Daeho? I work in the logging sector. I destroyed your machines. Insu's smile grew wider. A human. Even better. You understand colonial law, yes? You know that destroying corporate property is a serious crime? I know you were murdering innocent people, Daeho replied, his voice steady despite the pain. I stopped you. Murdering? Insu laughed, a cold sound. My dear man, you cannot murder squatters any more than you can murder vermin. They had no legal right to be here. Our machines were simply clearing the land for development, as we had every right to do. He gestured to the security officer. Arrest him. Destruction of property, interference with legal business operations, and trespassing on corporate claim land. I want the maximum charges filed. The security officer hesitated. Sir, perhaps we should investigate the circumstances before... Are you refusing a direct request from a corporate representative? Insu's voice grew hard. Need I remind you who funds the colonial security budget? Arrest him now or I will have your badge. The officer's jaw tightened, but he motioned to his men. 2 security forces approached Daeho with restraints. The Velhari began clicking in protest, and Hana and Taijun cried out, trying to run to Daeho. Their parents held them back, though Bora was clearly struggling not to join them. Daeho held up his hand for calm. He looked at the security forces and spoke clearly. I will not resist, but I want it on record. I knew exactly what I was doing. I would do it again. The words seemed to shock everyone. Insu blinked in surprise. Even the security officer paused. The Velhari went completely silent, their clicking stopped in disbelief. You would do it again? Insu repeated slowly. Even knowing the legal consequences? Even knowing you could face 20 years in a colonial prison? Daeho looked back at the Velhari settlement. He saw Hana and Taejun crying. He saw Jiwoo and Bora holding their children. He saw Sohee standing with her medical supplies, the woman who had saved his life. He saw Kyung-soo trying to protect his people with nothing but courage and words. He saw homes built with love and care, gardens grown with patience, a community that had done nothing wrong except fail to understand human bureaucracy. Then he looked back at Insu and spoke with complete conviction. Yes, I would do it again. These people did nothing to deserve what you did to them. If that makes me a criminal, then I am proud to be one. Insu's face flushed red with anger. You stupid, sentimental fool. You threw away your life for aliens. Not even for your own kind. For insects. He spat the last word like a curse. They are not insects, Daeho said quietly. They are people. They have families. They have homes. They have the same right to exist as you or me, maybe more, because they are not trying to take anything from anyone else. The security forces put the restraints on Daeho's wrists. The metal was cold and tight. As they led him toward the ship, the entire Velhari settlement began clicking in unison. It was a mournful sound like a funeral song. Some of them were crying, their tears mixing with their clicks. Hana and Taijun broke free from their parents and ran to Daeho. They wrapped their small arms around his legs, clicking desperately. No, not take him. He good, he hero. Daeho knelt down with difficulty, his restrained hands making it hard to balance. He looked at the children and smiled gently. It is okay, little ones. I will be fine. You be good for your parents, yes? Help rebuild, make your home beautiful again. But you are our family now. Taejun clicked through his tears. Family stay together. We will see each other again, Daeho promised, though he was not sure if it was true. Be brave. Both of you. You were brave enough to ask a scary giant for help. You can be brave enough for this. The security forces pulled him away and the children's parents came to collect them. Bora and Jiwoo both placed their hands over their chests and bowed deeply to Daeho, a gesture of utmost respect. Other Velhari did the same. Soon the entire settlement was bowing to the human who had saved them. Insu watched all this with disgust on his face. Pathetic, he muttered. Come, let's get this over with. I have real work to do. They loaded Daeho onto one of the security ships. As the door closed, he took one last look at the settlement. He saw Kyung-soo standing tall even in defeat. He saw Sohee with her hand over her heart. He saw Jiwoo holding his family close. And he saw Hana and Taijun still crying but standing brave like he had asked them to. The ship lifted off, and the settlement disappeared from view. Insu sat across from Daeho, studying him like a puzzle he could not solve. You know what I do not understand? He said finally. You could have just claimed ignorance. You could have said you did not know about the legal claims, that you thought you were helping innocent victims. The court might have been lenient. But instead you admitted everything. You even said you would do it again. Why? Daeho looked at him with tired eyes. Because it was the truth, and because someone needed to say it. What your company did was legal maybe, but it was not right. There is a difference even if you cannot see it. Insu shook his head. Legal is all that matters. Right and wrong are just words people use to feel better about themselves. The galaxy runs on laws and money, not feelings. Then the galaxy needs to change, Daeho said simply. Insu laughed. One man cannot change the galaxy. You will go to prison. The Velhari will be relocated and my company will get its mining territory. In a year, no one will even remember this happened. Daeho did not answer. He just closed his eyes and tried to rest his aching body. Insu was probably right. One man could not change anything, but he had to. The holding cell was small and cold. Daeho sat on the metal bench, his injured leg stretched out in front of him. His bandages needed changing, but no one had offered medical attention yet. He did not mind. He had been in worse places and felt worse pain. At least here he was alone with his thoughts. Those thoughts were interrupted by the sound of shouting from outside. Daeho looked up as a security guard rushed past his cell, then another. Something was happening. The station was always quiet and orderly, but now it sounded like chaos. Alarms began blaring. More guards ran past. Through the small window in his cell door, Daeho could see flashing lights. A guard finally stopped at his cell door. The man looked stressed and tired. You, he said to Daeho. You are the Lumberjack, right? The one from the video? Daeho blinked in confusion. Video? What video? The guard pulled out his tablet and held it up to the window. On the screen, Daeho saw himself. The footage showed his logging mech fighting the mining drones, protecting the Velhari settlement, finally charging at the massive harvester. The video was clear and detailed, showing everything that had happened. At the bottom, a counter showed the number of views. It was climbing so fast Daeho could barely read it. 200 million. 205 million. 210 million. That video, the guard said. It went viral 12 hours ago. Now there are protests outside this building. Thousands of people demanding your release. We have had to call in riot control. The colonial governor is getting death threats. Taeyang Industries' stock is crashing. This whole thing has become a nightmare. Daeho stared at the screen in disbelief. I do not understand. I broke the law. I destroyed corporate property. The guard laughed bitterly. Yeah, and apparently nobody cares. They are calling you a hero. They are saying the law is wrong. Human workers from a dozen different colonies have gone on strike, refusing to work for any company that does business with Taeyang Industries. Other alien species are watching to see how humans handle this. It is a complete mess. Before Daeho could respond, another guard rushed up. We need to move him now. The crowd is getting past the barriers. If they break in here, we will lose control completely. They opened the cell and helped Daeho to his feet. As they led him through the corridors, he could hear the protest outside. Thousands of voices chanting in unison. Free Daeho! Free Daeho! The sound shook the walls. It was like thunder that never ended. They brought him to a secure room deeper in the building. Inside, several people were waiting. One was a woman in an expensive suit with sharp, intelligent eyes. Another was a nervous-looking man in a colonial government uniform. And sitting in the corner, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else, was Insu from Taeyang Industries. The woman stood and approached Daeho. Mr. Daeho, my name is HFY. I am a lawyer specializing in colonial rights and corporate abuse cases. I am here to offer you legal representation, free of charge. Deho was still processing everything. Why would you do that? HFY smiled grimly. Because 10 years ago a corporation seized my family's home using the same legal tricks Taeyang Industries tried to use on the Velhari. We lost everything. I became a lawyer so I could fight back. When I saw your video I knew I had to help. You did what I wish someone had done for my family. The man in the government uniform stepped forward. He looked exhausted. I am Vice Governor Wu Jin. The governor sent me to resolve the situation before it gets completely out of control. Mr. Deho, the protests have spread to 15 different colonies. Workers are striking. Trading has stopped. There are calls for investigations into Taeyang Industries and colonial land management. This has become a political crisis. Insu stood up angrily. This is ridiculous. The man admitted he broke the law. He said he would do it again. You cannot just let him go because people are making noise. Aicha turned to face Insu with cold fury in her eyes. No. What is ridiculous is a system that makes it legal to destroy people's homes and lives just because they did not file the right paperwork. What is ridiculous is calling living beings squatters and vermin because they are not human. What is ridiculous is arresting the man who stopped a massacre while the people who ordered it walk free. It was not a massacre, Insu protested. It was land development. The Velhari had no legal claim. They lived there for 12 years. H's voice rose. They built a community. They raised families. And you want to say that does not matter because of paperwork? That is not justice. That is not even law. That is just bureaucracy used as a weapon. Wu Jin held up his hands. Please everyone calm down. We need to find a solution that works for all parties. There is no solution that works for all parties, HFY said firmly. Either you admit the law is being misused and fix it, or you continue to defend the indefensible and deal with the consequences. Right now, millions of humans are watching to see what kind of species we are. Are we the kind who protect the innocent? Or are we the kind who hide behind rules while corporations commit atrocities? Insu's face was red with anger. My company did nothing wrong. We followed every regulation. We filed all the proper claims. This is a legal matter, not a moral one. Deho finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. That is exactly the problem. If what you did is legal, then the law itself is broken. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at him. He continued, meeting Insu's eyes directly. You keep saying you followed the rules. I believe you. But the rules let you destroy a village full of innocent people. The rules let you drive families from their homes. The rules let you treat living, thinking beings like they are nothing. If those are the rules, then the rules are evil, and they need to change. You cannot change laws just because they hurt people's feelings, Insu said through gritted teeth. Yes, actually you can, HFY interjected. That is exactly what laws are supposed to do. They are supposed to reflect the values of the society that makes them, and right now, human society is making it very clear what it values. It values the man who risked his life to save children over the corporation that would crush those children for profit. Wu Jin's communication device beeped urgently. He checked it and his face went pale. The protests have reached the capital. The main government district is shut down. The governor is calling an emergency session of the Colonial Council. He looked at Insu. Your company's headquarters on 3 different planets is surrounded by protesters. Someone threw paint on your corporate logo at the New Seoul building. Social media is calling for boycotts of all Taeyang Industries products. Insu seemed to shrink. For the first time, fear showed in his eyes. This is getting out of hand. We need to control the narrative. Maybe if we just... It is too late for that, HFY said. You cannot control millions of angry humans. You can only hope they show you mercy. Over the next 3 days, everything changed very quickly. News organizations covered the story constantly. Every detail was examined and discussed. Reporters found other cases where Taeyang Industries had used similar tactics to seize land from smaller settlements. They found evidence of bribes paid to colonial officials to look the other way. They found internal communications where executives joked about clearing out the insects. The Colonial Council met in emergency session and passed new laws with shocking speed. First, any settlement that had existed for more than 5 years would be automatically granted legal recognition, regardless of paperwork. Second, corporations would be required to prove that land was truly unclaimed and unused before developing it. Third, a special court would be established to review all disputed land claims from the past 10 years. More importantly, investigators began looking into Taiyang Industries' business practices. What they found led to arrests. Insu was charged with bribery, falsifying government documents, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Other executives were charged as well. The company's stock price collapsed as investors fled. But the biggest change happened in the human colonies themselves. Workers who had never met each other, who lived on different planets light years apart, found common cause. They formed networks and unions. They shared information about corporate abuses. They supported each other's strikes and protests. Lumberjacks and miners, farmers and factory workers, all the people who did the hard physical labor that kept the colonies running, realized they had power. When they stood together, corporations had to listen. And they all remembered the video of one giant lumberjack standing alone against machines because it was the right thing to do. Other species across the galaxy watched with interest. The Velari were not the only aliens who had suffered from aggressive human expansion. Many had expected humans to side with their own corporations, to value profit over alien lives. Instead, they saw millions of humans rising up in defense of a small alien village. They saw humans angry at their own kind for being cruel. They saw humans demanding to be better. Ambassador Yuri of the Galactic Council gave a statement that was broadcast across known space. For years, many species have feared humanity's expansion. We saw you as aggressive, dangerous, unpredictable, and you are all those things. But today we learned something else. You are also capable of great compassion. You police yourselves. You demand justice not just for 6 months had passed since the day Deho destroyed the Harvester and changed everything. The forest of Verdant 7 looked different now. Where there had once been a clear divide between human territory and Velari territory, there was now something new. A bridge, a meeting place, a home that belonged to both. Deho's cabin sat exactly on the border between the two worlds. It was built with both human and Velhari techniques, strong metal frames combined with living wood that the Velhari had taught him how to shape without killing the tree. The cabin had large windows that looked out over a garden, and beyond that, the Velari settlement glowed with its soft blue and green bioluminescent lights. Deho stood in his garden, leaning on a shovel. His leg had healed well, though he still walked with a slight limp on cold days. His body bore scars from the battle, lines of pale skin across his arms and chest where Sohi's medicines had helped him heal. But he was alive and healthy, and that was more than he had expected. The garden was his pride and joy. He had planted vegetables and flowers in neat rows, using techniques his wife Mi-sun had taught him years ago. But he had also planted Velhari crops, strange glowing fungi and vine plants that the Velhari ate. The garden was a mixture of both cultures, just like his life had become. Uncle Deho, a high-pitched clicking voice called out. Hana and Taijun came running down the path from the Velhari settlement, their small legs moving quickly. They had grown in the past 6 months, both of them taller and stronger. Hana's shell had fully healed from the crack she had when they first met, leaving only a faint line as a reminder. "Good morning, little ones," Deho said, setting down his shovel. The children crashed into him as always, wrapping their arms around his waist in a hug. This had become their daily routine. Every morning before the sun rose, they would come to visit him and help in the garden. "We brought breakfast," Taijun announced, holding up a basket. Inside were fresh fruits from the Velhari gardens and bread that Bora had baked, using a mixture of human and Velhari grains. The smell made Deho's mouth water. They sat together on the cabin's porch, eating and watching the twin suns rise over the forest. Deho had built the porch wide enough for visitors, and it was rarely empty anymore. People came and went constantly, both human and Velari, seeking his advice or just wanting to talk. "Are you working in the forest today?" Hana asked between bites of fruit. "Yes," Deho replied, "but not alone. Your father and some of the other Velhari are coming with me. We are teaching human workers how to harvest wood without damaging the forest ecosystem. The Velhari way is slower but better for the trees." This had become Deho's new purpose. He was still a lumberjack, still working with wood and trees, but now he served as a bridge between human logging companies and Velhari environmental knowledge. The Velhari had lived in forests for generations and understood how to take what they needed without destroying everything else. Humans had the technology and tools to work quickly. Together they were developing new methods that satisfied both sides. The colonial government had even given this cooperation an official name, the Verdant Initiative. Other colonies were starting their own versions, bringing humans and aliens together to share knowledge and work toward common goals. After breakfast, the children helped Deho water the garden. They chattered constantly in a mix of clicking and human words. Both species' children were learning each other's languages now, and it was common to hear hybrid sentences. I am hungry, click click, can we eat the glowing berries? Jiwoo and Bora arrived shortly after, along with 3 other Velhari adults. They carried tools and supplies for the day's work. Jiwoo had become Deho's close friend and partner in the forestry work. Bora often came along to document everything, creating guides that could be shared with other settlements. Ready for another day of teaching stubborn humans? Jiwoo clicked with amusement. His translator had improved significantly, and Deho had learned enough Velhari language to understand simple conversations without it. Ready if you are, Deho replied with a smile. Though I think today's group will be more open-minded. They specifically requested training in Velhari methods. They walked together into the forest, following paths that both species had learned to share. Human workers were waiting at the designated logging site, a group of about 20 men and women. Deho recognized most of them, workers from various crews who wanted to learn the new techniques. Among them was Hyunwoo, the big lumberjack who had been one of the first humans to help rebuild the Velhari settlement. He had become something of a leader among the workers, encouraging others to participate in the cross-species cooperation programs. Morning, Deho, Hyunwoo called out. We are ready to learn. Show us how the Velhari do it. For the next several hours, Deho and the Velhari taught the human workers their methods. How to identify which trees could be harvested without damaging the forest. How to cut in ways that encouraged new growth. How to use every part of the tree, wasting nothing. The Velhari were patient teachers and the humans were eager students. During a break, Hyunwoo sat next to Deho and pulled out a canteen of water. You know, he said thoughtfully. 6 months ago I would have said this was all nonsense, worrying about trees and ecosystems, but now I see it differently. The Velhari way takes longer, sure, but the forest stays healthy. We can keep working here for generations instead of destroying everything and moving on. That is the point, Deho agreed. Humans have always been good at taking what we need. Now we are learning to give back too. It makes us better. Makes us more like the aliens we used to look down on, Hyunwoo said with a laugh. Funny how that works. We thought we were the advanced ones, but they had things to teach us all along. By mid-afternoon, the work was done. They had harvested enough wood for the human colony's needs while leaving the forest healthy and thriving. The workers said their goodbyes and headed back, already discussing how to apply these techniques in their own work sites. Deho and the Velhari group began walking back toward the settlement. But as they walked, Jiwoo stopped suddenly and clicked for attention. Look, he said, pointing ahead. On the path stood a group of aliens that Deho had never seen before. They were tall and thin with gray skin and large heads. Their clothing suggested they were from off-world. One of them stepped forward and spoke through a translator device. We are seeking Deho, the human who defended the Velhari settlement. We were told we might find him here. Deho stepped forward cautiously. I am Deho. What do you need? The alien's posture suggested nervousness. My name is Nar. I represent a settlement of my people, the Kalari, on the colony world of Frost Haven. We are having similar problems to what the Velhari experienced. A mining company is claiming our land and threatening our homes. We have tried legal channels, but the process is slow and the company is not waiting. We heard what you did here and we hoped. The alien trailed off, but the meaning was clear. They wanted help. They wanted someone to stand up for them like Deho had stood up for the Velhari. Deho felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. He looked at Jiwoo, who clicked thoughtfully. This is your choice, brother, but know that we will support whatever you decide. Deho thought about it carefully. He was not a fighter. He was not a hero. He was just a lumberjack who had done what felt right in one moment. But that moment had changed things. It had shown people that standing up to injustice was possible. And now, because of what he did, others were asking for the same courage. I cannot leave right now, Deho said to Nar. I have responsibilities here and my leg is still healing, but I can help you in other ways. I know a lawyer named HFY who specializes in these cases. I know workers who can organize strikes if the company tries to force you out. I know reporters who will cover your story. And I know that if humans see another corporation trying to hurt innocent people, They will respond just like they did for the Velhari. Nar's posture shifted to something like hope. That would be more than we dared hope for. We only need a chance to fight back. Then you will have it, Deho promised. Give me your contact information. I will reach out to my contacts and start organizing support. Your settlement will not face this alone. After the Kalari left, looking considerably more hopeful than when they arrived, Jiwoo clicked with amusement. You have become quite famous, brother. I think this will not be the last time someone seeks your help. Deho sighed. I did not want to be famous. I just wanted to protect some children. But you did more than that, Bora said gently. You showed the galaxy what humans can be. Not conquerors or exploiters, but protectors and friends. That is worth more than fame. That is a legacy. As they reached the settlement, Deho saw more evidence of the changes that had spread from one human's simple choice. Human and Velhari children played together in the gardens. Mixed work crews were building new structures. A human teacher was giving language lessons to interested Velhari, while a Velhari elder taught interested humans about forest ecology. Other species had started visiting too. The settlement had become a symbol of successful cooperation between humans and aliens. Ambassadors came to study how they did it.